Peter Thamel of ESPN announced that Ohio State offensive coordinator Brian Hartline has officially left. He is officially gone from Ohio State. I got his tweet right here. Sources say from Peter Thamel on X. Sources: Ohio State offensive coordinator Brian Hartline is expected to become the next coach at South Florida. He's Ohio State's play caller and built a reputation as the country's top developer of wide receivers. So, very, very interesting news. I did not expect this to happen. Yesterday, there was really not that much of a rumor mill going around. Like I didn't feel like there was a real rumor mill that Brian Hartline was going to take a head coaching job. Like obviously you knew that he was going to be a highly sought out coach to try and replace one of these head coaching vacancies. And you have like Lane Kiffin taking the LSU job. Auburn fired their head coach. USF fired their head coach. Penn State, obviously, maybe even UCLA. If we'll see how that turns out. The new coach that they put in there for the interim being has been doing pretty decently since they fired their head coach early in the season. But yesterday, it felt like there wasn't a real like, hey, watch out for Brian Hartline to USF. Like, it didn't feel like that. I didn't see anything on Twitter. I didn't hear anything about it. And then all of a sudden, you wake up in the morning and you just see that notification saying that Brian Hartline's taking the USF job. But you know what? I'm very happy for Brian Hartline. Like I said, I'm not a huge Ohio State fan. I thought this, I was shocked that I saw Brian Hartline going to USF. But this means a lot of things for Ohio State going forward because now you're going to have to find another offensive coordinator. You're going to have to try and find maybe a new wide receivers coach if you don't bump someone up that's already on the staff maybe, and we'll see who Brian Hartline takes with him too from Ohio State to USF because that's always a very real possibility. And obviously there's going to be a couple people that leave with Brian Hartline if he asks them to. So that's going to be very interesting to see. We'll see how Brian Hartline is going to be able to, use the NIL money that USF has. Obviously, they're not a big powerhouse in terms of football. They've had some success. This season they had a little bit of success early on in the college football season, but they haven't really necessarily been a powerhouse in terms of college football. So we'll see how they deal with how he deals with the NIL money, the transfer portal and all of that. But it's going to be very interesting to see because today is the National Signing Day, and Ohio State has a number one recruit who is a wide receiver who is going to be making his decision today. So with this news coming out that Brian Hartline is leaving Ohio State and going to South Florida, it's going to be very interesting to see if this guy who, by all intents and purposes, a lot of people have said that, he's going to choose Ohio State. Well, if this news of Brian Hartline leaving Ohio State to go to, South Florida is going to make any bit of difference, we'll see. I don't know. But we'll find out later on today when the National Signing Day happens. This kid's going to be, choosing his hat, signing on the dotted line, doing all that stuff. And you know what? Maybe he chooses Ohio State and then he decides to transfer to South Florida to be with Brian Hartline. Who knows? But Ohio State is going to have a lot of things to work out over the next couple of months. And especially, doing this when, they're about to play Indiana in the Big Ten Championship. We'll see if, Brian Hartline is going to stay because, sometimes coaches like to go. They like to go down to their new program and try and build things right away. So I don't know if he's leaving Ohio State right now or if he's going to continue to coach until, whenever Ohio State either wins the championship or gets bounced out in the playoffs. I don't know. I haven't seen any new update or report saying that. So we'll figure it out as the day goes on, I guess. But again, that's going to be very interesting for Ohio State to try and figure out with Brian Hartline. And, maybe do you go back to Chip Kelly? Chip Kelly got fired by the Raiders. Chip Kelly left after a couple years here at Ohio State. Do you go back to Chip Kelly, who had some success, and helped you, win the championship last year? Do you go back to that? I think that's a very real possibility. And I would not be shocked if, somehow, some way that maybe Chip Kelly does end up back in Columbus at some point. But anyways, that's just I wanted to do a little bit of a breaking segment for you Ohio State fans. I haven't really talked about Ohio State at all, or college football, frankly, for that matter, that much. But this was too big of a story to pass up and not talk about, because Ohio State's going to be impacted by this greatly. The college football is going to be impacted by this greatly. And we'll see how, what happens with Ohio State and their receiving room, with their, offensive coordinator. Do they go back to Chip Kelly? Do they bring someone up from the system? Does Ryan Day, have his hand in something? I don't know. But just thought I wanted to put my thoughts out there, talk about it, and, give you guys my thoughts and 2 cents on the matter. But Brian Hartline to South Florida, leaving Ohio State. Very interesting to see what the future holds for South Florida and that football program. But